Well friends, the day is finally here. Happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you, and may your heart be your guiding key. Ugh, saying that last one made me sick. Now, Star Wars is a universe very close to my heart. I actually prefer the prequel trilogy, as Revenge of the Sith is one of my favorite movies of all time. There's just something about everything coming together here, you know, the music, the story, those epic lightsaber fights, those epic meme quotes. But you and I are here to talk about video games, aren't we? As some of the absolute best Star Wars experience are actually found in this medium. That's why in honor of Star Wars Day, I'm doing a series on Star Wars games every Thursday after this first Wednesday for the rest of May, making one Star Wars review each week. And for May the 4th itself, you and I are diving into one of the most legendary Star Wars games of all time, and the one that fits the theme of this channel better than any other, namely Star Wars Empire at War. And with that, happy Star Wars Day, and May the 4th be with you. There was a time in video game history when a lot of franchise movie series would receive video game tie-ins. Empire at War is no direct tie-in per se, but it came out only about 8 months after Revenge of the Sith, and indeed around the same time as many other legendary Star Wars games did, so definitely during a time of heightened Star Wars mania. At any rate, Empire at War was the second strategy game I owned after Battle for Middle-earth, and the years around 2005 to 2006 is a period I very well would describe as something of a golden era for strategy games. I mean, imagine it, we had games like Battle for Middle-earth, Empire at War, Command & Conquer, Rome, Medieval 2, so many golden era titles came out during these years, and I frankly don't know if we've ever recovered. I think it goes without saying if you've ever played this marvel, but if you haven't, you really should have been there. Empire at War had this absolutely fantastic presentation, offering cinematic visuals rivaled by none, combining it with great strategy and that amazing soundtrack we know and love from the movies. The best part was that as one of very few games out there, Empire at War combined a galactic campaign map with 2 types of battles, both in space and on land, and everything was happening in real time. And so let's take a look at the campaign first, and see just what was so cool about it. I honestly don't know if I'm saying this with rose-colored glasses or not, but I have this feeling that video games in the early 2000s just gave us more right out of the box. You see, Empire at War's campaign wasn't just some tacked-on experience around the battles. Here we get to choose to play as either the Empire or the Rebellion, in 2 vastly different campaigns. Choose the Empire, and you find yourself playing the bad guys, hunting down rebel bases and searching for Jedi. Regardless of who you play as, the campaign takes place in the years between Episode 3 and 4, which incidentally is the setting for quite a few Star Wars experiences at this point. Darth Vader is your main character here, but you'll meet familiar faces like the Emperor and Boba Fett, and you'll definitely be using many of these characters in different missions and settings depending on the circumstance. Choosing the Rebellion, and you're fighting an uphill battle against a much more powerful Empire, making it that much more important to take advantage of what resources and intelligence you have to survive. Here, heroes like Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, and Captain Antilles are part of your leadership, and it's really fun to see ships and characters from the movies, which admittedly weren't given all too much screen time, be represented even better in this game. Empire at War's campaign takes place in real time, which I happen to love, as it just makes everything appear so seamless. The fact that you rarely rush to do anything makes it feel quite sandboxy as well, despite not being all too complex either. What you're doing here is essentially varying between constructing space stations in space and economic or military buildings on the ground, and both of these impact what happens next. You obviously need money to establish your armies and navies, and the fact that I can say both of these things is a dimension of Empire at War which cannot be understated. The rather insane thing about Empire at War's campaign as well is that the AI is actually brutal. They will space invade and land invade you at every opportunity, and with heavy numbers, which makes it that much more important to actually take care of every planet that you own, at least those neighboring the enemy. This brings us back to the main differences between the Empire and the Rebel Alliance, which is part of why it's so fun to play both of these campaigns in their entirety. You see, Empire at War does its best to differentiate between the 2 factions and to make them feel as unique as possible. At almost every turn, at least in the beginning stages, the Empire is the strongest faction, and to a much larger degree is able to output sheer, raw power. It often relies on cruiser-level ships, beginning with the Acclamator, which I always thought looked a bit boring to be honest. It takes care of rebel cruisers just fine though, but play a while longer, and you'll soon unlock the much larger Victory-class Star Destroyer, and finally, the biggest, the baddest Imperial Star Destroyers, which are virtually unstoppable against anything the Rebel Alliance might toss at you, except for perhaps their massive Mon Calamari star cruisers. Later in the game, it's even possible to move around with the Death Star itself, annihilating planets essentially at will if combined with a powerful supporting fleet. The Empire also serves up a few faster ships like the TIE Fighters and the Tartan Cruiser, but keep in mind that the Empire's Destroyer-class ships actually come with a large amount of TIE Fighters in them, so you potentially have a much larger fleet with you as long as you have a few destroyers present. In this sense, the Empire is all about brute force and power. If you additionally have the Forces of Corruption expansion, and play the more sandboxy Galactic Conquest mode as the Empire, it's actually possible to recruit the unbelievably massive Superstar Destroyer, the Executor, which belongs to Darth Vader. Rarely have I been as odd as when I controlled a fleet including the Executor, and rarely, if ever, did I lose those battles. Dude, Darth Vader's Superstar Destroyer was awesome to use in battle, and seeing it in action was just beyond. The Rebels on the other hand cannot from the beginning afford such massive engines of war, but does instead rely on smaller ships like X-Wings, Y-Wings, and cruisers to get the job done. The absolute excellent thing about space combat in Empire at War though, is that the Rebels are not doomed to lose. The X-Wings are actually better than the Empire's TIE Fighters 1-1, but when it comes to the larger ships, there are at least two factors that indicate how long they're good for. Each ship has a health indicator, but larger ships also come with shields, which are much more easily taken out with special bombs and torpedoes, equipment which the Rebels have aplenty. The Rebels tend to have to fight smarter rather than harder then, but they also have their fair share of stronger corvettes and frigates, whose designs I just find so intriguing. The late game is when the Rebel Alliance really takes a step up though, as the Mon Calamari cruiser tends to stand up to the best of what the Empire has to offer, with its massive shields, health, and damage output. These space battles, the unique variations and differences between the Empire and the Rebels, and the fact that the battles could all be watched in cinematic mode, a mode that mimics some of those awesome scenes from the movies, really made the space battles of Empire at War some of the coolest, most visually stunning I'd ever witnessed. Factor in the sounds as well, or even the fact that in order to conquer a defended planet, you'd often have to fight a massive space station, a platform which gave the defender a massive advantage, and you have the recipe for some of history's best RTS battle systems out there, and in a Star Wars game no less. I think one of those really satisfying things about the space battles as well was that every major ship or space station had special points of attack which you could destroy, and thereby hurting the enemy's ability to use lasers, call forth new ships, and have their shields repair. It's a really tactical thing when it comes down to it, and just having a space station was a massive boon. It's even possible to take control of turrets, which a defender could really use to their advantage, especially if outnumbered. And what's more about the space battles is that your money in the campaign actually transfers to the battle, meaning that you can pay for upgrades in real time, and if the battle map had mining facilities, you can actually make money during the battle, giving you a major advantage, especially if you were the defender. This dynamic between the Empire and the Rebels continues on the ground, which is the third and final space of operations in this game. The ground battles functions like many other RTS games out there. You have soldiers, buildings, and turrets, but instead of creating units in real time, the only units you can make use of are those you've already brought to the battle. Only so many can be used at once though, so it's important to remember that armies are made with planning and over time, not at the field of battle itself. In addition, in the campaign, buildings are often pre-made by the faction controlling the planet, but either factions can take over turrets, back-to-tanks, and repair stations for healing, or control posts which lend you defensive positions, and places where you can call in reinforcements from space. The Empire field a larger variety of machines than the Rebels do, beginning with stormtroopers and walkers, but ending with the massive beasts that are the AT-ATs, and I just love to see these monsters fire off their cannons. The Rebels once again take advantage of speed and tactics here, and I must admit that even though the Rebels too get some heavy hitters like the T-4B heavy tank, nothing is quite as cool as what the Empire offers. We mustn't forget the heroes either, and playing around with Darth Vader and many others is an absolute treat, as the game really shows off the powers of the Sith, Jedi, and all the other special characters. I mean, seeing Darth Vader literally lift up an enemy tank and just crushing it to death was something else.
Found something.
Even though I actually prefer the prequel series and would have absolutely loved to see a Star Wars Republic at War game, Empire at War really does Star Wars justice by being truly faithful to the time period we find ourselves in. I love that we see and can control these epic ships we know from the movies, and that we can even change the course of history by playing the campaigns here. But there's more, of course, as the expansion, Forces of Corruption, puts a different spin on things. Here, you're playing as a massive crime syndicate, fighting both the Empire and the Rebels for control of the galaxy. I didn't play the expansion campaign as much as the first two, and I honestly don't remember all too much about it. But what I found the most interesting here was that the Sand Consortium could actually make use of old Separatist and Republican technology. It made me thirst for a Republican strategy game even more, and even though there are mods for that, I would very much like a fully fledged game. And fingers crossed here, that's something we might get in the not too distant future. I mean, it should be common knowledge by now that the Clone Wars is the most interesting and strategy appropriate time period in this entire universe, right? But Republican or not, Star Wars Empire at War took a beloved franchise and not only made it one of the best games in that universe, but one of the best strategy games of all time. And I cannot for the life of me understand that it ended up with a less than optimal 79 on Metacritic. At least Steam Reviews knows what's up here. And in Empire at War, everything comes together so well. And in ages where other Star Wars games put you in the boots of the units fighting on the ground or in space, Empire at War actually put you in charge of entire armies and fleets, and did it with such class. It remains one of my favorite strategy games for these reasons, and would be so lucky to get a sequel which takes the best of Empire at War, but gives it even deeper mechanics, modernized visuals, and hopefully in the era of the Galactic Republic.
Attack run.
And that was Star Wars Empire at War, friends. I have to say, this game was something else back when it came out in 2006, but it holds up even now, and that really goes to show how everything Star Wars came together here. Be it the visuals, the sounds and sights, and the cool use of tactics and strategy, and even the combination of a campaign map and two types of battle maps, in space and on land. I'm still holding out for that sequel, and just really hope it'll take place during the Clone Wars. Yes, I do know there's an older game taking place during the Clone Wars, but that's from 2001 and doesn't hold up quite as well. If you enjoyed the video, I really hope you leave a like and consider supporting the channel further, either by becoming a patron or a channel member. Once again, happy Star Wars Day, thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!